The city slept under a fragile veil of calm, unaware that its streets, rooftops, and underground passages were about to become a theatre of fire and terror. London, 1940, a city that had seen centuries of triumph and turmoil, was about to face a darkness unlike any it had ever known. The air carried a sense of foreboding, subtle and almost invisible, yet for one man it spoke loudly, screaming warnings that would go unheeded. This was no ordinary warning. It came from the mind of a spy who had walked the fine line between deception and revelation, whose secrets could have turned the tide of history before the first bomb fell. He moved through shadowed alleyways, carrying nothing but the fragments of intelligence that would mark him as either a prophet or a fool. Each document he carried, each whispered conversation in dimly lit cafes, was a puzzle piece that painted a chilling picture: the Luftwaffe's plan to unleash a relentless aerial assault on London. Most dismissed it as paranoia, the ramblings of someone obsessed with foreseeing disaster, but he knew better. He had mapped the enemy's strategies, studied their tendencies, and understood the calculated precision behind the chaos they intended to bring. The city's innocence made it blind. Citizens went about their routines, unaware that the coming nights would be punctuated by the roar of bombers and the wail of air raid sirens. Families would huddle in cellars, clutching each other as explosions tore apart familiar streets, schools and churches. The very symbols of civilization would become markers on an enemy's map, their destruction a testament to modern warfare's cold efficiency. Yet, amid this growing storm, the spies' warnings remained unseen, unheeded by those who could have acted, by those who held the power to shield the innocent. In the quiet of his rented room, he reviewed maps with meticulous care. Lines of ink connected factories, docks and rail stations, revealing the patterns of attack the Luftwaffe would follow. Each intersection, each target, had been carefully chosen to maximize fear and chaos. The spy's insight was more than observation. It was prediction rooted in logic, deduction, and a deep understanding of human behavior under the pressures of war. He could see the future unfold in the present, each action of the enemy leading inevitably to catastrophe. Yet the spy faced an impossible dilemma: reveal too much, and he risked exposure, imprisonment, or death. Reveal too little, and the city would burn while he remained silent, a witness to history's cruel unfolding. He walked the narrow line, balancing the weight of truth against the danger of betrayal. The knowledge he possessed was a double-edged sword, capable of saving thousands, but also of condemning him if wielded incorrectly. Every night, the shadows seemed to whisper, reminding him that the balance between survival and revelation was precarious, and that one misstep could erase him entirely. The enemy's planes were already in motion, though invisible to the citizens of London. Reconnaissance flights, coded communications, and silent preparations were laying the groundwork for what would later be known as the Blitz. From his vantage point, the spy saw the patterns forming like a predator circling unseen prey. Each calculation, each observation was a note in a symphony of destruction, one that the city had no idea was about to begin. The spy's heart carried the weight of foresight, a burden that few could understand and even fewer could act upon. He moved cautiously through the streets, observing the city's ordinary life, juxtaposed against the extraordinary knowledge he bore. Children played in gardens, unaware of the shadows overhead. Shopkeepers arranged goods in preparation for the coming week, oblivious to the horrors that would descend. Even as he passed unnoticed, he sensed the subtle signs: the unusual flight of a bird, the hushed tone of a military courier, the fleeting glance of a man in uniform. These details formed a mosaic of premonition, each one affirming the impending chaos, and each one sharpening the edge of urgency that he carried like a blade against his conscience. No one listened. No one believed. The spy's warnings were too precise, too informed, too real. The weight of truth pressed against the walls of ignorance. and the city remained blissfully unaware of its impending trial. Yet for him, every second counted. Every heartbeat was a drumbeat marking the approach of destruction. Each one bringing the shadow of the Luftwaffe closer to London's doorstep. History was about to write itself in fire, but he had seen the first lines long before the ink dried. The spy's story begins not with the roar of bombs or the chaos of fire, but with foresight, courage, and a solitude that only someone carrying the future in their mind could endure. His prediction was precise, his warnings urgent, and his mission, though invisible to all others, was monumental. The fate of a city rested not only in the hands of its citizens, but in the knowledge of one man who dared to see what others could not. As night fell over London, the spy's mind raced with calculations that no one else could comprehend. He traced the flight paths of enemy bombers, predicted the timing of raids down to the minute, and mentally marked the buildings that would suffer first. Every pattern he observed, every coded message he intercepted, added layers to a map of impending destruction. The city's normal rhythms, the chatter of cafes, the clatter of trams, the laughter of children, masked the storm that approached like a predator circling prey. The spy moved with purpose through narrow streets, avoiding attention, noting the smallest details, a uniform slightly out of place, the hurried glance of a messenger, the subtle changes in guard rotations. These were signals that others ignored, but for him they were confirmations, threads of a tapestry of war that only he could read. Each hour brought him closer to a decision that could save thousands or doom them all. He could alert the authorities, risk exposure, and potentially prevent the devastation. But such an act carried immense personal danger. Every move he made had to be calculated, precise and invisible. While the city slept, the Luftwaffe prepared to unleash fury. The spy's intelligence indicated the scale of the attack, the number of bombers, and the exact targets chosen to break the spirit of London's citizens. He foresaw the panic, the chaos, the firestorms that would sweep through streets and homes, and the courage that ordinary people would summon to survive. But foresight alone was insufficient. Action was required. The spy understood the weight of knowledge, the burden of truth, and the consequences of silence. He reviewed every piece of information, every intercepted signal and every observation, seeking patterns that might reveal a vulnerability, a way to mitigate the destruction. But the clock ticked relentlessly, and the Luftwaffe's plans advanced with mechanical precision. As he walked past familiar landmarks, the Tower of London, Westminster, and the banks along the Thames, he imagined the devastation to come, buildings reduced to rubble, streets filled with fire and smoke, civilians running for shelter, the wail of air raid sirens cutting through the night. The spy's vision was so vivid that it seemed to engulf him, a weight pressing on his chest. Yet he remained composed, a solitary figure carrying the future in his mind. His role was invisible, unsung, but monumental. History would not know his name, but the outcome of the Blitz could have hinged on his decisions. Every detail mattered, every second counted. Even the smallest piece of intelligence could alter the trajectory of events, could save or condemn thousands. The spy's solitude was both a shield and a curse. He could trust no one completely, for any leak could lead to his capture or the compromise of his mission. Every conversation, every movement had to be calculated with the precision of a chess master plotting moves in a game of life and death. The air was thick with tension, the calm before the storm, and London remained oblivious to the impending nightmare. The spy's heart carried the dual weight of fear and resolve. He understood that foresight without action was meaningless, yet reckless action could bring disaster closer. The paradox of his situation was relentless. A constant test of intellect, courage, and restraint. He imagined the first bombs falling, the chaos erupting across neighborhoods, and the civilians scrambling for survival. Yet he also imagined the possibility of intervention, of delivering critical information in time to alter the course of events. The spy's mind was a battlefield of probabilities, calculations and what-ifs, each one demanding careful consideration. He walked the streets like a shadow, unseen, unheard, yet intimately connected to the fate of the city, carrying knowledge that could ignite hope or deepen despair. History teetered on the edge, and he alone held the threads that could determine its fall or rescue. The coming hours would define London's resilience, the spy's courage, and the power of foresight in a war where secrecy, timing, and precision were the ultimate weapons. London, 1940, stood as the heart of Britain, a sprawling metropolis of history, commerce, and culture. Unaware that it was perched on the edge of devastation, the city had already endured the shocks of war, rationing, and uncertainty. Yet life continued with a fragile normalcy. Citizens moved through streets lined with cobblestones. Shops bustled with commerce, and children played in gardens. Blissfully ignorant of the plans being hatched beyond their view, the spy who carried the warnings of the Blitz understood the city's vulnerabilities with unparalleled clarity. Every street, bridge and building represented both a target and a lifeline for the nation. He studied the patterns of air defense, the limitations of radar, and the readiness of anti-aircraft batteries, noting where gaps could be exploited and where civilians were most exposed. The British government had taken precautions, yet bureaucracy and disbelief slowed action, and the spy's intelligence often landed on desks that hesitated to act. Political debates and military deliberations created delays, leaving the city exposed to an enemy that had meticulously prepared for the assault. The Luftwaffe's strategy was designed not only to destroy infrastructure, but to demoralize an entire population, turning London into a stage of fear and despair. The spy had infiltrated channels where plans were discussed, deciphering coded messages and observing troop movements, piecing together a mosaic of impending chaos. Each intercepted communication added clarity to his vision. Each observation reinforced his predictions, and each calculation revealed the scale of what was to come. The spy understood that predicting the Blitz was only half the battle. Ensuring that the warning reached those who could act required cunning, discretion, and impeccable timing. The city's landscape played a role in his calculations, from the winding alleys of Westminster to the bustling docks along the Thames, each zone carrying strategic importance for both defense and enemy attack. The patterns of daily life became markers in his mind, signaling where potential targets overlapped with civilian concentrations. He mapped these intersections meticulously, considering the consequences of delay or error, knowing that misjudgment could cost thousands of lives. The spy's background in intelligence allowed him to anticipate the enemy's methods, from aerial bombing formations to the use of incendiary devices designed to ignite firestorms. He studied historical precedents, learning from conflicts in Spain and France, applying those lessons to the imminent threat over London. The city's population was resilient, yet unaware that their routines, so ordinary and comforting, were fragile shields against a meticulously planned assault. Even the weather became a factor in his calculations, clouds, wind, and moonlight influencing the trajectory of bombers and visibility for both defenders and attackers. The spy's expertise bridged the gap between observation and foresight, a rare ability that allowed him to see not only the enemy's present movements, but their likely future actions. He understood that the Blitz would not be random. It was a calculated campaign aimed at weakening morale, disrupting supply chains, and demonstrating the Luftwaffe's superiority. The spy's background gave him access to insights that most could not imagine, from deciphered messages to intercepted orders, each piece confirming the scale and precision of the operation. He observed troop deployments, airfield preparations, and the logistical efforts required to sustain a prolonged bombing campaign, all while remaining invisible to those around him. The city's historical landmarks, cultural centers, and industrial facilities were all in his mental crosshairs. each one a potential target that would serve the enemy's objectives. Even as London thrived in the day-to-day, the spy's mind constantly replayed scenarios of destruction, weighing probabilities, and preparing contingency plans. He was acutely aware that the intelligence he held could be ignored, doubted or dismissed, yet he persevered, knowing that persistence could mean the difference between disaster and survival. The spy's deep understanding of the city's fabric, its people, and its vulnerabilities made his warnings both urgent and precise, a map of foresight amidst a city blissfully unaware of the nightmare that approached. The spy's observations extended beyond maps and intercepted communications. He studied the people of London, their routines, and the rhythms of daily life, understanding that human behavior would shape the outcome of the coming Blitz. He walked streets at dawn, noting the movement of workers, the flow of traffic, and the congregation of children at schools, each detail adding precision to his predictions. The spy recognized that the city's resilience depended not only on defense systems, but also on the public's ability to respond under pressure. He catalogued safe routes, potential shelters, and vulnerable zones, aware that civilian survival hinged on timely information and guidance. Every whispered conversation in a crowded cafe, every glance exchanged by someone in uniform became data points, fragments of a larger mosaic that revealed enemy intentions. He cross-referenced these observations with intelligence from informants, military dispatches, and intercepted messages, building a comprehensive picture of both opportunity and threat. The spy's work required a delicate balance between action and discretion, revealing too much risked exposure, too little rendered foresight meaningless. His mind constantly calculated probabilities, which areas would be targeted first, how fire would spread, how civilians would react, and how defenses might succeed or fail. London's industrial heart, the docks, railways, and power stations, drew special attention, for their destruction would cripple both morale and functionality. The spy noted the precision with which the Luftwaffe planned strikes, understanding that each bomb would serve a strategic purpose beyond mere destruction. He imagined the chaos that would erupt, the streets filled with smoke and fire, the sirens screaming, yet also the courage and improvisation that ordinary citizens would summon to survive. He considered the interplay between civilian life and military infrastructure, knowing that the enemy aimed to exploit both for maximum effect. Even minor details, the height of buildings, the direction of prevailing winds, the layout of streets, became crucial in his mental simulations of air. The spy's background in intelligence allowed him to interpret these details not as isolated facts, but as components of a coherent strategy, a deadly orchestration aimed at London's heart. He anticipated the timing of attacks, the formations of bombers, and the sequences that would inflict maximum psychological and physical damage. His knowledge extended to the limitations of anti-aircraft guns, blackout procedures, and emergency responses, all factors in the delicate calculus of survival. The spy's understanding of human psychology was equally critical. He knew that panic could spread faster than fire, that misinformation could paralyze response, and that morale was as vital a target as any factory or bridge. He mapped out contingency plans, considering how civilians might flee, how shelters could be optimized, and how key personnel could be protected. All while remaining invisible and undetected, the spy's work was exhaustive, methodical, and relentless, yet he bore it with a quiet determination. Knowing that the lives of thousands rested upon his insight, his predictions were grounded in both logic and experience, informed by historical precedents, strategic knowledge, and a deep understanding of the enemy's tactics. Every day, the spy refined his models, updated his maps, and re-evaluated his assumptions, aware that the Blitz would begin when conditions aligned and that foresight alone would not prevent catastrophe. The spy's mission was a race against time, a solitary endeavor in which the balance between knowledge, secrecy, and action could decide the fate of a city. He moved through London with eyes wide open, observing the ordinary world while carrying extraordinary knowledge. Anticipating the horror that would soon descend, every detail mattered. Every observation sharpened the picture of what was to come, and every moment was weighted with urgency. History would judge the Blitz as a period of destruction, courage, and resilience. Yet few would ever know of the spy whose foresight offered a chance, however fragile, to mitigate the devastation. The spy's background, intelligence, and meticulous planning transformed him into the unseen guardian of London, a figure whose insight bridged the gap between ignorance and preparedness, between chaos and strategy. Even as the city went about its routines, he held in his mind a vision of what was to come, preparing, predicting, and hoping that his warnings would find a path to those who could act before it was too late. The city's vulnerability became increasingly apparent as the spy continued his observations, the weight of knowledge pressing on him with relentless intensity. He had seen patterns in the enemy's preparations, subtle shifts in reconnaissance flights, and coded messages that indicated an imminent escalation. Every intercepted communication added layers to a picture that was becoming clearer and more terrifying by the day. The spy knew that despite his warnings, bureaucratic delays and skepticism could prevent timely action, leaving London exposed to devastation. He understood that the city's defenses, though formidable in some areas, were fragmented and slow to respond to emerging threats. The Luftwaffe's plans were precise, and their calculated approach relied on exploiting these weaknesses, striking where resistance was minimal and where the psychological impact would be greatest. The spy's role became a race against time, a delicate balance between revealing enough to prompt action and concealing enough to avoid capture or suspicion. He navigated a labyrinth of intelligence networks, gathering fragments of information, piecing together clues, and interpreting them against the backdrop of historical tactics and current enemy capabilities. Every hour brought new risks. Every movement, every communication could expose him to detection, imprisonment, or execution. The city's population remained largely unaware of the impending danger, their daily lives continuing as if the storm overhead were a distant rumor. Children played in gardens, shopkeepers arranged goods, and workers moved along familiar routes, all blissfully ignorant of the air assault that loomed above. The spy knew that this ignorance, while comforting to them, magnified the stakes of his mission. He had to act with precision and discretion, ensuring that vital information reached the right people without compromising his cover. Each decision carried consequences that extended far beyond himself. A single misstep could lead to widespread destruction, loss of life, and the failure of the very warnings he risked everything to deliver. The enemy's reconnaissance had already mapped the city's layout, identifying critical targets, power stations, transportation hubs, industrial facilities, and densely populated residential areas. The spy's calculations indicated that the sequence of attacks would be methodical, aiming to maximize both physical destruction and psychological terror. Even small oversights could result in catastrophic losses, and he was acutely aware that time was slipping away with every passing moment. He analyzed previous bombing campaigns, studied enemy tactics, and projected the likely movements of bomber squadrons, translating raw intelligence into actionable foresight. The spy understood that the conflict was not solely about bombs and fire. It was a battle of perception, morale, and the ability of the population to withstand relentless pressure. He mapped potential evacuation routes, noted the locations of temporary shelters, and considered the psychological impact of each potential strike. He coordinated discreetly with contacts who had influence, pushing information through channels that were slow, resistant, and cautious. Knowing that even a hint of urgency could be dismissed as alarmism, the tension weighed heavily on him. The awareness that his foresight could save lives, yet might never be fully acted upon, It was a paradox of war, possessing knowledge that could change outcomes while being constrained by human hesitation and institutional inertia. The spy's every night was consumed by calculations, simulations, and mental mapping of the chaos to come, preparing for scenarios that others could neither imagine nor comprehend. His conflict was internal as much as external. The struggle between action and secrecy, foresight and disbelief, survival and duty defined every choice. Even as London thrived in its apparent calm, the spy prepared for a confrontation that would test the limits of courage, intellect, and endurance. Each piece of intelligence he held was a key to mitigating disaster. Yet each required delicate handling to prevent catastrophe. The spy's conflict was the tension between what was known, what could be done, and the unpredictable human element that could amplify or diminish the effectiveness of his efforts. Every shadow in the city, every uniformed figure, every whisper of information was a variable in a vast and deadly equation. He carried the burden of foresight like a weapon, precise and sharp, capable of saving thousands or causing ruin if mishandled. History would later recount the Blitz as a story of destruction and resilience. But the hidden conflict of the spy, his calculations, and his quiet struggle remained unseen by most. A silent battle that shaped the fate of London itself. The spy's awareness of London's impending peril intensified with each passing day, the weight of responsibility pressing down like an invisible hand. He understood that every delay in conveying intelligence could magnify the destruction to come. Every hesitation, a potential tragedy. The Luftwaffe's meticulous planning was evident in the patterns he observed, from reconnaissance flights to the precise timing of supply movements. The spy knew that even a single miscalculation on his part could result in catastrophic consequences, not only for the city, but for his own survival. His dual role as observer and predictor created a tension that was constant and unrelenting, a psychological pressure few could comprehend. Every intercepted message, every coded dispatch added depth to his understanding of the enemy's intentions, yet also increased the burden of secrecy. He moved through London with acute vigilance, noting the slightest anomalies, shifts in guard patterns, unusual movements in warehouses, and subtle changes in civilian behavior. Each detail was a potential clue, a fragment of a larger puzzle that, if interpreted correctly, could avert disaster. The spy's internal conflict mirrored the external threats he faced. He balanced the need for action against the imperative of concealment. Knowing that exposure could be fatal, the city's inhabitants remained largely oblivious, their routines a stark contrast to the chaos he anticipated. The spy understood that this ignorance was both a blessing and a curse. While it preserved morale, it also meant that unprepared civilians were highly vulnerable to the calculated assaults awaiting them. He analyzed the placement of anti-aircraft guns, radar stations, and emergency response teams, noting where gaps existed and where the Luftwaffe could exploit weaknesses. His predictions accounted not only for physical destruction, but also for the psychological impact of sustained bombing campaigns, understanding that fear could be as lethal as fire. The spy's conflict extended to interactions with contacts and authorities, where urgency had to be conveyed without revealing the full extent of his knowledge. He navigated layers of bureaucracy, skepticism, and hesitation, often frustrated by the inertia that slowed potentially life-saving responses. Every calculated risk he took was weighed against the potential benefits and dangers. The stakes, nothing less than the lives of thousands of Londoners. The spy's mind functioned as both laboratory and battlefield, simulating outcomes, projecting movements, and anticipating enemy adaptations. His insights into human behavior were as critical as his intelligence on troop movements and aerial strategies. He considered how civilians might react under stress, how confusion could spread, and how small interventions could mitigate panic. Even the timing of messages, the choice of words, and the channels used for communication were subject to his meticulous scrutiny. The spies' conflict was continuous, a cycle of prediction, observation, decision, and restraint that defined every day. He understood that foresight alone was insufficient. It had to be coupled with precise, measured action. The stakes were immense, the consequences of error catastrophic, and yet the spy persevered, driven by duty, knowledge, and an unyielding sense of responsibility. The city's structures, from industrial hubs to residential blocks, were mapped in his mind, each a potential target whose destruction would ripple across society. His calculations accounted for fire spread, human movement, emergency response limitations, and the sequence of attacks that the Luftwaffe would employ. Every detail reinforced the gravity of his mission. Every observation sharpened the clarity of impending danger. History would remember the Blitz as a period of relentless bombing, courage and resilience, but the hidden conflict of this spy, the tension between secrecy, foresight and action, remained invisible to most, a silent battle that shaped the course of events. The spy's struggle was both monumental and solitary, an internal war that paralleled the external destruction approaching London. He carried the weight of potential catastrophe with disciplined focus, ensuring that every prediction, every insight, and every decision was calibrated to minimize loss and maximize preparedness. The conflict was relentless, the pressure unending, yet the spy remained steadfast, a guardian in the shadows, anticipating every turn of events, and preparing for the storm that would soon engulf the city. The first echoes of the Blitz began to stir over London as the spy watched from hidden vantage points, the city oblivious to the approaching storm. The night sky, once calm, now harbored shadows that carried death, and the distant hum of engines signaled the precise moment when destruction would begin. The spy's calculations had predicted the sequence of attacks down to the minute, each bomber's trajectory mapped in his mind with surgical precision. He observed the silhouettes of the enemy aircraft forming against the moonlit sky, the patterns confirming everything he had foreseen. His intelligence had warned authorities, yet bureaucratic delays meant that defensive measures were only partially deployed, leaving gaps that the Luftwaffe exploited with ruthless efficiency. The spy moved swiftly through streets, guiding contacts and relaying discreet warnings to those who could act without revealing his identity. Every intersection, every alley, and every structure had been considered in his mental map, and now the reality of his foresight collided with the chaos unfolding. He witnessed the first explosions tear through rooftops, the fiery arcs of incendiary bombs setting buildings ablaze and igniting panic among civilians. In cellars and shelters, Londoners clung to one another, the wail of sirens blending with the roar of engines and the thunder of bombs hitting their targets. The spy's heart pounded with urgency, knowing that his role as an unseen guardian was being tested in the most literal sense. Every decision he had made, every route he had planned, every warning he had conveyed, became a lifeline for those who could heed it. He noted the movements of fire brigades, emergency responders and volunteers, their bravery juxtaposed against the overwhelming scale of the attack. The spy's calculations extended to the spread of fire, anticipating which blocks would ignite next, how wind patterns would influence flames, and which shelters would remain safe for civilians. The city's landmarks, factories, bridges and rail stations became focal points of both destruction and defense, each strike shaping the broader course of the Blitz. He intercepted further intelligence mid-attack, adjusting guidance and relaying critical updates to key contacts who could implement protective measures discreetly. The spy's foresight transformed into immediate action, his mental maps now guiding real-world responses that could mitigate loss of life and infrastructure. Even as bombs rained down, he maintained composure, analyzing patterns, predicting subsequent strikes, and ensuring that vital information reached those capable of making split-second decisions. The scale of the assault was staggering. And yet the spy's preparation allowed him to anticipate, respond, and influence outcomes despite remaining unseen by both enemy and citizenry. His understanding of the enemy's strategy, combined with meticulous planning and rapid adaptation, created a subtle countermeasure to the Blitz, a silent but crucial layer of protection for the city. As fire and smoke filled the streets, the spy observed the bravery of ordinary Londoners, their courage amplifying the effectiveness of any preemptive guidance he had provided. He calculated not only physical trajectories, but also human reactions, foreseeing where panic might spread and where quick thinking could prevent casualties. Every decision, every observation, every piece of intelligence was a thread woven into a larger tapestry of survival and resilience. The spy's actions were invisible yet pivotal, shaping the city's response and buying precious time for emergency measures to take effect. He moved with purpose, guiding messages, ensuring safe passage for key personnel, and coordinating with those who could translate foresight into protection. The night unfolded as a battle of precision, foresight, and courage. And the spy's role, though hidden from view, proved to be a decisive factor in mitigating the full scale of devastation. The first hours of the Blitz tested every hypothesis, every prediction, and every contingency the spy had prepared, confirming the accuracy of his intelligence and the necessity of his calculated actions. History would record the Blitz as a night of chaos and courage. But behind the scenes, the spy's foresight, strategy, and decisive interventions had quietly altered the course of events, saving countless lives and guiding the city through the opening salvo of destruction. The night intensified as the Blitz continued over London, flames painting the sky in shades of orange and red, and the spy remained a silent observer and covert orchestrator of survival. His predictions guided discreet actions, influencing where civilians moved, which shelters were utilized, and how emergency responders prioritized their efforts. The roar of engines, the thunder of explosions, and the distant cries of fear confirmed the precision of his foresight. Each moment a validation of the intelligence he had painstakingly gathered over months. He tracked bomber formations as they advanced, predicting their release points, trajectories, and the likely sequence of destruction, adjusting guidance to contacts with a meticulousness born of urgency and expertise. Streets became rivers of smoke and chaos, yet his interventions ensured that evacuation routes remained passable, temporary shelters were reinforced, and critical facilities had minimal exposure to direct hits. The spy observed the interplay between destruction and human resilience, noting how civilians instinctively sought safety, how volunteers formed impromptu firefighting brigades, and how emergency services adapted to the relentless assault. Every piece of intelligence he had collected converged in this moment, transforming foresight into real-world mitigation of the Blitz's effects. His mental maps now directed not only where attacks would occur, but also where human response could save lives, reduce panic and maintain a semblance of order amidst the inferno. The spy remained unseen, moving through shadows, yet his presence was felt in the subtle adjustments, the preemptive measures, and the lives that survived due to his calculated interventions. He intercepted additional communications mid-assault, interpreting enemy adjustments and relaying critical updates that allowed local defenses to anticipate subsequent strikes. The precision of his calculations extended to fire spread, structural vulnerabilities, and the psychological impact of sustained bombardment, allowing him to provide guidance that saved both infrastructure and lives. The city's defenses, bolstered by his foresight, were stretched to their limits, and yet the spy's planning allowed for optimal allocation of resources, ensuring that anti-aircraft fire, rescue efforts, and civilian guidance were coordinated with unseen precision. Even as neighborhoods burned, key personnel were guided safely, vital bridges remained operational, and supply lines for emergency services were maintained. His work transformed the chaos into a managed response. A quiet battle of intelligence and strategy played out in tandem with the physical destruction unfolding above. The spy's understanding of human behavior, tactical acumen, and anticipatory calculations were the invisible shield protecting London's citizens from total devastation. He predicted not only the paths of bombs, but also the reactions of the populace, the movements of emergency responders, and the shifting priorities of both attackers and defenders. Every observation, every calculation, and every discrete action reinforced the effectiveness of the city's response, turning potential catastrophe into a managed crisis. History would remember the Blitz for its destruction, courage, and resilience, but the spy's contributions remained hidden, a silent force shaping outcomes and preserving lives amid the chaos. His foresight transformed the night from sheer terror into a testament of human endurance, strategy, and quick thinking. The spy's role was a complex dance of prediction, observation, and intervention, balancing secrecy with necessity, foresight with action, and caution with decisive influence. His meticulous preparations had ensured that even as fire consumed buildings and the wail of sirens echoed across the city, lives were saved, chaos mitigated, and the initial impact of the Blitz absorbed with a degree of order and resilience previously unimaginable. The spy remained a shadow in the narrative of history, yet his contributions, guided by intellect, courage, and foresight, defined the unfolding of events, proving that knowledge, when wielded with precision, could shape the course of war even in its most destructive moments. The first hours of the Blitz concluded with the spy's calculations validated, his interventions effective, and the city, though scarred, still standing, a testament to the invisible hand of foresight navigating the storm of destruction. As dawn broke over London, the devastation of the first night of the Blitz became visible. Yet the spy's foresight had softened its blow, guiding citizens, emergency services, and critical infrastructure through the chaos. The city's skyline was marred by smoke and fire. Yet pockets of survival and organized response demonstrated the impact of his unseen interventions. His intelligence had allowed key personnel to anticipate strikes, reinforced evacuation routes, and prepared shelters, minimizing casualties and ensuring that vital operations continued despite the destruction. The streets, though scarred, were navigable. Fire brigades moved with purpose, and emergency teams acted with a level of coordination that belied the suddenness of the attack. The spy's predictions regarding bomb trajectories, targets, and the sequence of strikes had proved uncannily accurate, and the measures taken in response had saved countless lives. He observed from the shadows as families emerged from cellars, shaken but alive, their survival a direct consequence of preemptive guidance and calculated interventions. The city's resilience was evident in the way ordinary citizens adapted, improvising to mitigate damage, assisting neighbors, and following safety protocols that the spy had quietly helped to shape. Every burned building, every collapsed street was a reminder of the enemy's precision, yet the survival of so many was equally a testament to foresight, preparation, and human courage. The spy's work extended beyond immediate guidance. His observations informed long-term adjustments to civil defense, fire control, and emergency response strategies, ensuring that subsequent nights could be met with greater preparedness. His intelligence had revealed vulnerabilities that the city could now address, from gaps in anti-aircraft coverage to deficiencies in blackout procedures and evacuation planning. The impact of his interventions was quantifiable. Casualties were lower than anticipated. Critical infrastructure remained functional, and morale, though shaken, had not collapsed. The spy moved cautiously through streets that bore the marks of destruction, noting which areas required further attention, which shelters needed reinforcement. and where civilian assistance was most urgently required. Every observation he made fed into a dynamic map of survival, a constantly updating guide for those acting to protect the population. His role, though invisible, had tangible effects, shaping the way London endured the Blitz and preserving lives that might otherwise have been lost. The enemy's plans had been formidable, yet the spies' foresight introduced variables they could not anticipate, reducing the full potential of devastation and buying the city precious time to recover and respond. He documented patterns of bombing, civilian movement, and emergency response, ensuring that future attacks could be met with improved strategies and preparedness. History would remember the Blitz as a period of terror and resilience. Yet the spies' unseen hand had materially influenced outcomes, demonstrating the power of foresight, intelligence, and meticulous planning. The spies' own experience was one of intense pressure, isolation, and moral responsibility, knowing that every success had been achieved at the risk of exposure, capture, or death. Every life saved, every collapse prevented reinforced the value of his interventions and justified the months of preparation and vigilance that preceded the first night of the Blitz. His intelligence had created a framework within which London could endure, adapt, and continue functioning despite the enemy's intent to cripple and terrorize. The outcomes of the initial assault were a mixture of tragedy and triumph, destruction tempered by survival, chaos mitigated by foresight, and despair countered by preparation. The spy's observations extended beyond physical damage. He assessed the psychological impact on civilians, noting resilience, fear, and the emergence of communal support networks that would prove vital in sustaining morale during sustained bombing. The city had been tested, its infrastructure challenged, and its population frightened. Yet the spies' guidance had created a structure of response that allowed London to endure, a silent triumph hidden within the visible scars of war. As subsequent nights of the Blitz unfolded, the spies' interventions continued to shape the city's resilience, every prediction and calculated action subtly reducing casualties and damage. The patterns he had foreseen played out with chilling accuracy, yet his foresight allowed for timely adjustments, guiding emergency responders, reinforcing shelters, and anticipating the enemy's next moves. His intelligence informed both immediate decisions and strategic planning, creating a framework within which London could endure the relentless assault. The city's infrastructure, though scarred, remained operational in critical areas, allowing communication lines, transportation networks, and essential services to continue functioning despite the onslaught. The spy moved through streets cloaked in darkness, observing the effects of his guidance, noting where civilian response was effective and where additional adjustments were required. Every intersection, every shelter, every fire brigade's deployment was part of a living map, updated in real time by his keen observations and rapid assessments. His work extended beyond the physical survival of the city. He also monitored psychological resilience, understanding that morale was as vital a target as factories or railways. The spies' interventions influenced behavior, encouraged cooperation, and instilled cautious confidence, ensuring that panic did not spread unchecked and that civilians remained as safe as possible under extreme conditions. His intelligence highlighted vulnerabilities in anti-aircraft coverage, blackout procedures, and emergency planning, allowing local authorities to implement immediate improvements and long-term strategies for subsequent raids. The spies' meticulous calculations accounted for the spread of fire, structural weaknesses, human movement, and the sequencing of attacks, enabling him to provide guidance that minimized casualties and damage. Every decision was informed by both historical precedent and real-time observation, a synthesis of experience, foresight, and acute awareness of human behavior. He coordinated discreetly with contacts who could act on his guidance without revealing his identity, balancing secrecy with urgency and ensuring that every measure taken was both effective and safe. History would remember the Blitz as a series of terrifying nights, yet the unseen influence of the spy had materially shaped outcomes. Saving lives and preserving vital infrastructure, he witnessed moments of bravery, improvisation, and solidarity among civilians and responders. Moments that his guidance had enabled by reducing chaos and providing subtle direction. Every successful evacuation, every fire contained, every shelter effectively utilized, was a testament to the spy's foresight and diligence. A quiet victory hidden within the visible devastation of the Blitz. The city's capacity to endure and adapt was enhanced by his interventions, demonstrating that intelligence, preparation, and anticipatory action could mitigate even the most calculated attacks. The spy remained vigilant, continuously updating mental maps, analyzing patterns, and predicting enemy adaptations to ensure that his guidance remained effective throughout the campaign. His work exemplified the profound impact that a single, informed individual could have in shaping the outcome of events. Even amidst overwhelming forces and widespread destruction, the outcomes of the Blitz, both immediate and long-term, reflected a mixture of destruction, survival, and strategic advantage achieved through foresight and meticulous planning. The spy's influence extended beyond tangible effects. His calculations and interventions created confidence among responders, enabled rapid adaptation, and preserved a sense of agency among a population under relentless attack. Every night tested the boundaries of his knowledge, endurance, and courage, yet he remained steadfast, an unseen guardian navigating the chaos, balancing secrecy with decisive influence, and ensuring that London's resilience endured against the odds. History would remember the Blitz for its terror and courage, but the spy's unseen hand, guiding, calculating, and saving lives, remained a hidden yet crucial factor in the survival and endurance of the city. The spy's foresight, strategy, and relentless vigilance transformed potential catastrophe into a managed crisis. A silent triumph that shaped the fate of London while remaining invisible to the world. The aftermath of the first waves of the Blitz revealed a city scarred yet unbroken, a testament to resilience shaped not only by courage, but by the unseen hand of the spy whose foresight had guided survival. He moved through streets still smoldering from the previous night's destruction, observing the subtle effects of his interventions and noting where additional measures could enhance safety and recovery. Every demolished building, every shattered window, and every scarred street was contrasted by the survival of lives, the effective deployment of emergency services, and the maintained function of critical infrastructure. The spy understood that history would record the Blitz as a period of terror and bravery, yet few would comprehend the magnitude of his contributions. The quiet orchestration of survival that unfolded behind the scenes. His intelligence, calculations, and anticipatory guidance had created a framework within which London could endure, adapt, and recover, demonstrating the power of foresight in the face of overwhelming force. The city's citizens, though shaken, displayed remarkable resilience, improvising solutions, assisting one another, and adhering to safety measures that had been influenced by the spy's unseen direction. Every successful evacuation, every prevented fire spread, and every coordinated response reflected his meticulous planning and insight into both human behavior and enemy strategy. The spy's observations extended to psychological resilience, noting how individuals coped with fear, uncertainty, and loss, and how communities formed networks of support to withstand the ongoing bombardment. He documented patterns of survival, response, and adaptation, creating a mental record that could inform future defensive measures and civil protection strategies. His work ensured that subsequent nights of the Blitz were met with greater preparedness, that the lessons of each attack informed the next, and that the city's response improved incrementally under his silent guidance. The spy's presence remained invisible, yet the effects of his foresight were tangible, shaping outcomes in ways that history would scarcely acknowledge. His calculations had accounted for bomb trajectories, human movement, structural vulnerabilities, emergency response capabilities, and the unpredictable behavior of both civilians and attackers, weaving together a comprehensive understanding of the battlefield that was London itself. He balanced secrecy with urgency, action with discretion, knowing that exposure could compromise not only his life, but also the effectiveness of his interventions. Every step, every observation, every discreet communication had been designed to influence outcomes while maintaining the covert nature of his role. The spy's contribution was a quiet triumph amid visible destruction, a demonstration that intelligence, planning, and foresight could alter the course of events even when faced with overwhelming odds. His understanding of the interplay between human behavior, strategic infrastructure, and enemy tactics allowed him to preemptively address vulnerabilities, mitigate risk, and guide actions that saved lives. The city's infrastructure, from transport networks to power stations, had remained functional in critical areas thanks to his guidance, enabling emergency services to operate effectively despite ongoing attacks. History would remember the Blitz for its destruction, fear, and resilience, but the spy's invisible influence had created a layer of protection that allowed London to endure, recover, and adapt. The closing days of the initial assaults highlighted the effectiveness of foresight, planning, and rapid adaptation as the city navigated destruction with a degree of order and coordination that would have been impossible without the spy's interventions. Every saved life, every prevented disaster, and every effective response reinforced the value of his unseen work, creating a narrative of survival that was inseparable from the intelligence, courage, and meticulous planning he had provided. His role, hidden from public recognition, demonstrated the profound impact that one informed, diligent individual could have in shaping the outcomes of war, a silent guardian whose foresight had altered the trajectory of destruction and preserved the heart of London itself. The spy's legacy, though largely invisible, remained etched in the resilience of a city that withstood the Blitz, a testament to intellect, courage, and unwavering dedication in the face of overwhelming adversity. The final hours of the initial Blitz left London battered yet unbroken, its citizens daunted but determined, and the spy's unseen hand had ensured that survival outweighed destruction. His foresight had transformed chaos into managed response, guiding evacuation, emergency measures, and strategic allocation of resources in ways invisible to the city itself. Every street that remained passable, every shelter that functioned effectively, every life preserved was a direct result of his meticulous planning and precise intervention. The spy moved silently through the remnants of shattered buildings, observing patterns of survival, noting where human resilience shone, and where additional guidance could further minimize casualties. He understood that history would remember destruction and heroism, yet few would grasp the quiet influence that foresight, intelligence, and careful action had exerted on outcomes. His intelligence had bridged the gap between knowledge and survival, translating observation into action, prediction into practical guidance, and calculation into tangible results. The city's response improved dramatically as subsequent nights unfolded, informed by lessons drawn from the spy's observations, interventions, and anticipatory adjustments. His work encompassed not only immediate survival strategies, but also long-term adaptations, including the reinforcement of critical infrastructure, improved evacuation protocols, and enhanced coordination of emergency services. Every measure was calibrated to balance secrecy with effectiveness, urgency with discretion, and action with strategic foresight. The spy's impact extended beyond immediate physical survival. He influenced morale, behavioral patterns, and community organization, ensuring that civilians maintained composure and cohesion under sustained bombardment. His guidance allowed volunteers, responders, and officials to operate efficiently, reducing panic and maximizing the effectiveness of limited resources. The spy's calculations accounted for the complex interplay of enemy tactics, city layout, structural vulnerabilities, and human behavior, creating a living map that adapted dynamically to the evolving situation. Even as the Luftwaffe altered its strategies, the spy anticipated changes, recalibrated predictions, and relayed critical guidance to those able to implement it. Maintaining a layer of protection against the relentless assault, history would recount the Blitz as a period of fear, destruction, and resilience, yet the spy's invisible interventions had materially shaped outcomes, saving lives, protecting infrastructure, and sustaining the spirit of a city under siege. Every night, every raid, and every response reinforced the value of foresight, preparation, and quick informed decision-making. The spy's work providing a silent backbone to London's endurance. The visible scars of destruction were tempered by unseen successes, lives saved, fires contained, and vital operations preserved, all outcomes influenced by his meticulous planning and continuous vigilance. His presence, though invisible, was palpable in the coordination of actions, the mitigation of chaos, and the preservation of critical functions, a hidden force shaping the trajectory of survival and resilience. The spy's closing reflections encompassed both satisfaction and solemnity. He had guided a city through unprecedented peril, yet he remained acutely aware of the fragility of life, the randomness of destruction, and the continuing threat that loomed over London. History would recognize heroism in many forms, but the quiet, precise, and impactful contributions of this lone figure remained largely unacknowledged. A testament to the power of intellect, courage, and foresight in times of extreme adversity, the spy's legacy was etched not in monuments or public acclaim, but in the continued survival, resilience, and adaptability of London itself, a city that endured the Blitz with scars, stories, and strength shaped in part by his unseen hand. As the city began to recover, rebuild, and reflect on the nights of terror, the spy remained vigilant, a silent guardian whose foresight, calculation, and dedication had quietly altered history, proving that even in the darkest hours, knowledge, strategy, and courage could tip the balance between catastrophe and survival. The closing chapter of the initial Blitz thus stood as a dual narrative: visible destruction and hidden triumph, terror and resilience, chaos and calculated survival, all intertwined under the watchful, unseen influence of the spy who had predicted the storm before it began.